We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I remain your host, Mark Angelides, and we're joined, long time no see, by Mr. Scott Cosenza, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, amongst many other things. Good to have you back, Scott.
Cheers, Mark. It's definitely my pleasure to be here.
What you are the most useful person to have on right now, because everything appears to be in the law courts, whether that's talk of impeaching judges for trying to attack presidential plenary powers, or all sorts of things that are just happening. But the first one I want to get to, Scott.
But before we say that, it's I think the Al Pacino movie with Keanu Reeves is a devil's advocate, where
it is.
He explains that you want to be a lawyer because you get to position yourself. Not that I have done that, by the way, purposefully, but that is a kind of unique feature of the role. You do get to kind of position yourself next to power in all aspects. So I do strive to be useful. So let's hope I can meet that challenge.
Absolutely, and let's avoid any Shakespearean quotes regarding lawyers.
Indeed.
So the big thing that popped into my head whilst figuring out what would be the most pertinent thing to talk about regarding the legal challenges facing Donald Trump is one that actually he's brought upon himself. And I think this is a great segue into what we'll be talking about later in the show. And so I came up with this title for this segment, and you tell me what you think. Disparate impact or desperate measures. I think that's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. It's another movie title, by the way, Desperate Measures, with Michael Keaton. Fantastic movie. So disparate impact. It looks like Donald Trump is targeting the whole premise of disparate impact. Now, I'm very new to this. So, Scott, could you give us a brief explainer of what disparate impact is? Sure. And why Donald Trump is wanting to get rid of it?
Yeah. So this actually kind of encapsulates a much larger issue that those of us who are concerned with sort of freedom and liberty have been on about for quite a while. If we go back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination, for instance, in hiring on the basis of race and sex and other things, national origin. The difficulty is that sometimes when people discriminate on those bases, they're not obvious about it. They don't say no blacks need apply or no Irish need apply with a sign out front. They just manufacture qualifications for a job that then exclude those people. So we use the most charitable kind of analysis of the disparate impact stuff. It's people trying to get around those get-arounds. So they see company A, for instance, discriminating against black people, and they want to make sure that they don't do that anymore. But because there's no smoking gun, they just happen to have 1,000 employees and not one of them is black, it becomes a difficulty to charge them successfully with discrimination and have them take remedial measures and go forth without that discrimination. But the devil's in the details, right? Because
of course,
then what they've done is they've said, well, we'll just look at if there's a disparate impact on these rules, and then we will infer or assume that there is discrimination, which of course, as you might imagine, leads to lots and lots of instances where there was no discrimination at all. It just so happens that maybe if you required, high-level engineering degrees or many different qualifications, you're just going to, by nature, have a fewer applicant pool from blacks or some protected class, women or people of a certain national origin, that may have no basis in discrimination. And here's another factor, and this is sort of the big wraparound, Mark. One of the things that conservatives and libertarians are on about is if the people who pass the laws decide that something's not working out in the law, they should pass a new law. They shouldn't impose regulations on the American people and companies which are not passed into law. And that's what this disparate impact stuff is. It's a regulation, if you will, or a reaction to enforcement measures by the executive rather than a law itself. There is no disparate impact law. It's just, this is how the Department of Education, Department of Labor, Department of Justice, at the national and their state level affiliates kind of try to enforce the law. And if you're company A and you get a letter from the Department of Labor that says they don't like the way you're doing something, well, the costs of actually fighting them in court are so great
Mm.
that most employers just decide they just shy away from pain, right? They have the sense that a worm has to turn away from the pain, and so they do, and they adjust their policies, often to the detriment of, by the way, everybody in the job market, and also giving, oftentimes unearned advantage for those in protected groups. So, was that a good thumbnail for you, or
That
or did I
that pretty
muddy the
much runs
waters?
runs the whole beat there.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that occurred to me while you were describing that very, very well for us. And this is something that's actually quite recent. Elon Musk was recently sued before the Trump administration.
Well, every day of the week, right? I
Every
mean,
day of
as
the
you have
week.
not
But
differentiated
it
today
was
from any other day.
for not hiring people who were non-green card holders. And I'm presuming that came under the disparate impact
So that would be
methodology.
an impermit. So the theory of the law would be an
Yeah.
impermissible discrimination against national origin, which you're not
Yeah.
permitted
But
in
of
employment.
course, the funny, I say funny, the tragic, it's always tragedy, not comedy in
Tragicomic.
these cases,
Yeah.
is that of course it was to do with rockets and propulsion systems. So under other laws, he was not allowed to actually hire anybody who was not a permanent legal green card holder of the United States. So he was being
With a security clearance,
with
probably,
this,
right?
yeah, of course. I mean
Yeah.
that's the key,
A
right?
high security clearance, I'll
And
bet.
another thing that occurred to me, I came across a Reuters article on this whole disparate impact thing, and it was an explainer. Now, I love and I use the term not in all seriousness. I love the Reuters explainers because they're supposed to be explaining things to you rather than telling you why they're good or
Rather
bad,
than
right?
rather than employing their journalistic techniques to back a certain narrative that's unsupported by objective fact.
So
How dare you, Mark? I can't believe you.
one of the examples they used to essentially buoy the idea that, Trump getting rid of disparate impact was bad was that it would disparately impact individuals who and it was the imposition of physical fitness requirements. Um, and so by having physical fitness requirements in your hiring or onboarding process, you're discriminating against people who are perhaps overweight or perhaps have a disability.
Well,
And
you may discriminate again all day long against the overweight, by the way. That is not recognized as a protected class. Sad to say for those of us who are packing on the pounds here. But
I feel your pain.
but the example you're talking about actually was they said that it then discriminated against the elderly or the
Yes, that
near
is correct. Yes,
elderly
yes.
because they are less physically capable, generally speaking, than others. Um, yeah,
Yeah, so
the real resolution for any of this stuff is if you want to have a law about this thing, we should fight about it in the Congress and pass a law or not, right? And then that can be the rule. But right now the rule is you can't discriminate against certain people on certain bases.
mm,
The impetus should be on them to prove if they were discriminated against on these bases. And I'm not saying those cases will be easy to make, but whoever said these cases should be easy to make? In other words, it's a massive burden for a company to undertake defending themselves against such a thing. And the marketplace is the cure. I have to remind you and everyone, I love to remind people about this. The Jim Crow laws in the South were not laws that gave people and private actors the right to discriminate against people by race. It required them to do so because even in Alabama, right after slavery, okay, and in the Jim Crow era, the legislators were unconvinced that the people would be sufficiently discriminatory to negatively impact blacks, okay? They needed those laws that punish them from doing so. So the idea that in 2025 we need those laws, well, I just think it's laughable.
yeah, the idea that I mean, it comes back to this idea that if you are purposely discriminating based on certain factors, the marketplace will not react well to you. I mean, obviously, there's discernment and there's discrimination, right? So you're discriminating against less qualified applicants, who are discriminating against people who can't do a job. But the marketplace will really rectify your situation by hitting your bottom lines if you are basing it on something that's pretty much arbitrary in terms of uh, what's required for a business to run. I find that the idea that we're looking away from markets to solve these things, it's it smacks of socialism to me, Scott. I really think it does.
The market has the cure for all this stuff, which is why the statistic that, not that we want to go viral on a controversial note, but the idea that, women get paid significantly less than
Oh yeah.
men, like why not open the law firm that then, you get to pay your staff
Mm,
20% less, whatever that number is, and you get to eat that profit, right? So, or a
yeah.
factory or any other thing. The market is the cure for this.
Yeah. Well, as I think every sensible person knows, that there's no such thing as a gender pay gap in real terms. It's based on amount of hours worked, it's based on choices made, it's based on longevity within a system, willingness to sacrifice personal life for corporate well-being.
There may even be the reverse in some industries. I don't know that
Oh,
that's been
sure.
studied yet, but given the level of accommodation and favoritism because of special treatment,
Hmm.
which does seem to be ending now with in the Trump era, or at least being beaten back. There may be the opposite. Whereas for hours worked and experience given, it may be you may be in a superior position by being a member of one of the protected classes rather than one of the others.
So it's time for people to start lining up with their disparate impact cases, I think, to to
TikTok.
rectify that wrong, eh? So one more question on this, Scott, before we finish up and move on to the broad swath of uh, cases that Trump's affecting. What will be the impact of Trump's, essentially his dear colleague missive to agencies to not follow this route?
Well, if he pushes it and they implement it, meaning if it's, sometimes these things are like flares that get sent up and kind of burn
Mm.
out, but I don't know, I don't have the sense that this is that a massive impact because the state level agencies oftentimes and the private actors take their cues from the federal government. So if you say, not only is this not okay, but we're working against this thing, whatever that thing may be, if it's a regulation and if it's in the discretionary bandwidth of the government, which this certainly is, we can expect to see massive change.
Mm. Yeah, it should be fascinating to watch. Now, we're going to be back with Scott Cosenza after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.